Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I gotta tell you, being an entrepreneur, I will not go through the rest of my career without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, Piracetam, Modafinil, Nupep, Uridine monophosphate. I mean, phenylpiracetam, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 67 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Bell. Thanks so much for being with me. Thanks so much for listening. Today's podcast is going to be on the difference between different racetams. This was a nootropic subreddit that triggered this podcast. Such a great place to get topics to talk about. And that underlies a question that I think a lot of people that are going into nootropics have an issue with. Like, what should I take? Should I take oxiracetam? Should I just start with piracetam? Should I take aniracetam? Should I take pramiracetam? What's the deal with fasiracetam? What about coliracetam? What about phenylpiracetam? Right? What about nefaracetam? They're looking at all these the major 8 racetams and thinking like, well, which one should I start with? And more importantly, which ones offer which benefits? Are they all the same? Do they all create similar effects? And why do people choose one over the other? So I want to kind of get into my philosophy on it, my experience with it over 10 years of taking racetams. Racetams are, besides modafinil and besides uridine, besides theacrine, racetams are my favorite nootropics to take. I mean, there's nothing else out there besides PRL853 and Nupep that work on memory the way that racetams do, particularly aniracetam, piracetam, and pramiracetam. And there's certainly nothing that works on just like jump-starting mental energy and kind of putting you like in a modafinil state than phenylpiracetam. So, I mean, these are my favorite, a class of my favorite nootropics for sure. I think that applies to a lot of other people that take nootropics. So I'm going to explain all of the differences between the racetams and kind of just give folks an overview of what I think about them, how I stack them, and what I hope to achieve when I take certain racetams to clearly delineate the difference. 6 powerful products support this broadcast. Let's get into them. But first I want to say, if you're new to this podcast, check us out on the web at livecortex.com, livecortex.com/blog, giant blog for nootropics information. This podcast, which is the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast, is at episode number 67. I mean, we've got all the other 66 episodes on livecortex.com/blog on there to listen to. And then, of course, on iTunes, just like Google the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast on iTunes. On Facebook, we really got to get a lot of folks over at Facebook. So come like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cortex Stacks. All right, facebook.com/CortexX. Our products are the following. I'll run through them real quick, and we'll get right into the content. Number 1, the Cortex Nootropic Stack. It is fitting that we have a stack. We would not have a nootropics podcast without a stack. That only makes sense, and our stack is exceptionally strong. No BS, no hypey BS. I'm trying to tell you, this is a strong stack. That's what we tried to do. The chief complaint in the world of nootropics around stacks, pre-made stacks, is that they're not strong enough. They're not noticeable enough. Nothing is like modafinil. We changed that with the mighty Cortex. It is a nootropic stack for productive individuals that like a lot of mental energy and like to feel like they are driven. Get a bottle of Cortex at livecortex.com, livecortex.com. Hey, right now, if you're listening to this on Sunday, I think it's the 16th or 17th or 18th or something of February. This will be, it's the 18th of February. This will last through this coming week. The coupon code 8 gets you $8 off of Cortex, taking it down to $24. The rest of our products I'll explain at the end of this podcast just so we can get right into the content, but mostly we have digital downloadable nootropics books on racetams, on Nupep, on nootropic stacks for business, on aniracetam, and on basically everything else in between. We have a nootropic starter pack, which is probably our most popular product, and that is a bottle of Cortex and Smarter, Better, Faster, which is our digital downloadable nootropics book that teaches you everything about all the major body nootropics, shows you how to stack them, shows you how to cycle them, and then gives you my own personal stacks you can't find anywhere else. That's called the Nootropic Starter Pack. Get all this stuff at livecortex.com. Coupon code 8 through this week, starting now, February 18th. Takes $8 off of everything. All right, so racetams, for those of you that don't know, racetams are basically just a class of nootropic compounds that have been around for quite some time that all do similar things, meaning they work on similar elements of brain chemistry, but they're a little different mechanistically. And for some people, some are going to be better than others. Most of them have been significantly studied So like, they've been studied for cognitive fatigue, or they've been studied for, reducing oxidative stress in the brain or being neuroprotective somehow. They've been studied for improving memory in situations where you give like some sort of anti-memory agent to a mouse, like a compound called scopolamine is what's normally used, and then it messes with their memory, and then you take these racetams in and administer the racetam to the mouse, and they get their memory back. And so what has happened over the course of the last... more intensely and more noticeably 10 years has been that people have been taking these compounds. These are pharmaceutical compounds that are classified as supplements mostly, so you can get them. They're legal to take in the United States and a lot of other countries, and using them for cognitive performance even if they don't have major deficits, and it's been working. My take on that is that people probably have cognitive deficits, and that's why they work. I mean, if your cognition's totally great and totally optimized, which I think is probably kind of impossible because you're aging, your brain is deteriorating like slowly over time. You might be getting hit up with toxins in the environment, all this sort of thing. You might have diseases or whatever that mess with brain function. That seems very common. It's one reason why people get into nootropics. And so, people still get brain performance. People are going to get brain performance benefits from racetams just because, their brains aren't perfect. And so in the nootropics sphere, racetams they've got to be the most popular compound. Now these days C-Max is getting a lot more attention. Nootropics Courses is always out there. Modafinil is pretty popular, but racetams really always are right there in the discussion. There's 8 major racetams. There's piracetam, aniracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, coliracetam, fasiracetam, pramiracetam, and then nephiracetam. And they all do work sort of similarly in that the primary, uniformed mechanism they have is to increase the speed at which the brain releases a particular chemical called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is implicated in a bunch of different kind of brain functions like focus and working memory and verbal fluency and problem solving and a bunch of different things. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter that the brain uses to do a whole bunch of stuff, to include fire muscles. Like when you move your hands and when you're lifting weights, you're burning acetylcholine. The signals being sent to your muscles, are being sent, facilitated via acetylcholine. So it's this major nervous system neurotransmitter that is essentially excitatory. And without it, if it doesn't function well, this is one of the reasons people have memory deficits and people have otherwise verbal fluency problems and functional brain performance issues. The common thread is that they all foster the working of acetylcholine over baseline. Oxiracetam and aniracetam force the brain to release more of it in the hippocampus, which you encode memories in. And then some of the other racetams optimize the way that the cholinergic system as a whole, which really just refers to any system of the brain that uses acetylcholine, any pathways in the brain, cholinergic pathways that use acetylcholine to do their thing and are activated by acetylcholine, like coliracetam. Coliracetam improves the way that your brain takes the precursor to acetylcholine called choline, which is a sort of a deviant of the B complex. It's essentially classified as a complex B vitamin, choline, and turn it into acetylcholine. There's a process that your brain uses to do that. There's actually a labeled process. It's called high-affinity choline uptake, and high-affinity choline uptake is positively modified. It's basically enhanced via coliracetam. So it's like this incredible thing, but that's like one of the differentiators between the two. And so let's just start there. Oxiracetam, aniracetam, they work on similar mechanisms of the brain, so they're quite similar. But coliracetam is different in that it instead of just getting the brain to release and use more acetylcholine, it's actually just optimizing the way the brain makes acetylcholine, the way the brain formulates acetylcholine. So the synthesis of acetylcholine seems to be quicker, and that adds a different effect, right? But one of the things that it doesn't do compared to aniracetam and oxiracetam is it really doesn't super modulate these glutamate receptors called AMPA receptors. AMPA receptors are basically just a subtype of the higher class of glutamate receptors. Aniracetam and oxiracetam, they stimulate these receptors, these AMPA receptors. They're allosteric modulators of them, which basically means that they allow the signal strength of glutamate to reach these receptor sites, they kind of speed up that signal strength. So it's like excitatory, it's stimulating, it's mental energy, but they don't really modify in a way that causes tolerance the receptor sites. So it's like this really interesting positive, they call it allosteric modulation. But what Racetam doesn't do is that. Racetam is only working on this improvement of the way the brain synthesizes acetylcholine. It is not aggressively working on AMPA receptors. Okay, so that's two differences right there. But let's look at aniracetam and oxiracetam. Seemingly they've got similar mechanisms, right? They work on acetylcholine release in the hippocampus, so they improve your memory. They both stimulate cholinergic receptors to make acetylcholine kind of just function better throughout the brain. But the major anecdotal difference, the experience difference between the two of those racetams is that oxiracetam is much more focus-inducing and aniracetam is much more stimulation and working memory mental energy inducing. Why is that? Why is that? The answer might lie in the degree to which they stimulate AMPA receptors, and I would imagine that aniracetam is a little more stimulatory on the AMPA receptors in the glutamate system than oxiracetam is, and that's probably what constitutes that. What, on the other hand, constitutes the focus effect for oxiracetam versus aniracetam? I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just the optimization of cholinergic receptors, as well as the signaling of acetylcholine in the hippocampus, the increased release, without a strong AMPA receptor modulation, like is in the case with aniracetam, and therefore you get some of the stimulation, but you just get a focus effect, a better focus effect. That could be the deal. So there's some differentiation there. But then let's look at phenylpiracetam. Okay, phenylpiracetam is unlike aniracetam and is unlike oxiracetam. It's unlike coliracetam too, in that it is like the modafinil for racetams. It's like essentially it is a mental energy and speed of processing, productive drive, kind of just like drive you to work kind of racetam. And it's so powerful and so potent when you take it, like it just like turns on brain energy, something crazy. And the significance of the brain energy that you get when you take an average dose of 75 to 150 milligrams of phenylpiracetam is so much stronger than the stimulatory response that you might get from aniracetam or oxiracetam that it's crazy. It feels like coffee and modafinil combined. I mean, it's really a strong thing. And so, that's one of the answers to the question, why are racetams different? Are all racetams different? Why do people take different racetams? It's like, if you want strong working memory and stimulation, just take aniracetam. If you want working memory, brain fluidity, verbal fluency, and the capacity to focus for longer periods of time than normal, then that's oxiracetam. But if you just need to get in gear because you're having, you're sick, you had the flu last week and you're kind of getting over it, you didn't sleep all that well last night or whatever, and you just need to get your butt in gear, then phenylpiracetam is going to be better than those other racetams in that regard. But then let's break down fasiracetam. See, here's where this gets really interesting. Fasiracetam upregulates GABA B receptors. I believe it's GABA B receptors. And so, why would that be helpful? For a lot of people, for whatever reasons, whether they're taking pharmaceutical drugs or they drink too much alcohol or something, they've got GABA system malfunctions in their brain. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that inhibits excessive brain firing. And it is, if it's working right, it can prevent you from being anxious and having anxiety problems if it's working, correctly. But if it's not working correctly, one of the things that underlies it not working correctly is the receptors that receive GABA in the brain. GABA B, one of the receptors, the GABA B receptors, might not be regulated. Well, they might be downregulated. They might not be working correctly. They might not be working the way that they need to work. And so fasiracetam comes in and works to upregulate those receptor sites, making GABA function a lot better. But it also works on acetylcholine and a cholinergic functioning as well. So totally different, right? Totally different than other racetams. In that if you want to get a good, calm, clean focus that kind of makes you feel like you're in a good mood at the same time, Because, I mean, aniracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, they're very stimulatory, but I don't really think I feel great. I don't feel like I'm in a happy mood when I take them. I just want to work. Fasiracetam, on the other hand, is the kind of racetam you take if you want to actually feel good, be in a good mood, kind of feel like pleasant, feelings of pleasantness, and you want to work and be productive at the same time. Okay, so that's one of the major differences. And again, I mean, that's why people take different racetams for different reasons. What about pramiracetam? The pramiracetam's mechanisms are pretty similar to aniracetam and oxiracetam, working on cholinergic signaling and cholinergic receptors. But the difference between it in potency is that it's just significantly stronger and requires lower doses than some of these other racetams. So you take it in like 100 to 300 milligram quantities, and it just cranks up working memory and brain performance in the area of functioning, just functional brain performance. You don't want to do a spreadsheet or some otherwise stuff that requires a lot of cerebral intensive work. Pramiracetam is great for that. What we've come to learn in our consulting service, we had this consulting service where now it's like we're consulting folks every day on nootropics, college students, medical students, that legit doctors, like, pass medical school and have their own practices, want brain performance, never learned about nootropics. They don't teach them about that in medical school. Business professionals, everybody else in between, we consult these folks every day. And one of the things that we found, particularly with people that need to study a lot and read a lot and understand what they are reading and comprehend it all, is that pramiracetam in pretty low doses, 100 milligrams or so, seems to work better for them than other racetams. So it's like now you got the differentiation between some of these other racetams we mentioned and pramiracetam, which pramiracetam, allows people to study better and retain information better. It's like the study racetam. So how different is that? I mean, it's just a totally different thing. I mean, these things, again, you see what I'm saying about how they work on similar receptor sites or neurotransmitter systems, but because of these subtle differences in potency or in certain receptors that they attack or in the degree to which they operate within AMPA receptors or modulate AMPA receptors, the strength of how they operate and intensify AMPA signaling is different. So the outcome is different. We'll end on piracetam. Okay, piracetam is like it's like the first racetam that was pretty popular. It's still used by a lot of people. I mean, I think it gets, I'm a burp factory over here. It gets less attention than it should. I take piracetam a lot, frankly. One of my favorite stacks to take is 2 grams piracetam, 120 or so milligrams of caffeine, just a giant cup of coffee, and 200 milligrams of L-theanine. It's a great stack. It's a great everything stack. Kind of just gets me in, gets me verbally fluent, gets my brain ready to work. But piracetam is less stimulatory of AMPA receptors. So it's got like a less of a stimulant effect to it. It has some stimulation of AMPA receptors. If you go read the Wikipedia page, I'm quite sure it describes how it's basically marginal. It's not significant at all. But it does optimize cholinergic signaling and receptors like some of the other racetams. But what it does that's differentiated is it improves oxygen and blood flow to the brain. It also modifies the way that the brain uses glucose, in a positive way. And so it's got these different things, right? Working on cholinergic signaling, but also optimizing blood flow and optimizing glucose, and not working on AMPA receptors to the degree that oxiracetam and aniracetam do, right? So just a major difference. And so it is less potent, all things considered, so it requires more doses. So you take it in 2 grams, 2 to 4 gram doses, really 1 to 4 gram doses, but my sweet spot is 2 grams, and I can get away with 4 grams, depends on what's going on. I had a crappy day the day before, 4 grams is good. And massively differentiated between that and other racetams. I take it, I'm not stimulated. I don't want to I feel productive, but I feel calmly productive. It's a subtle thing. Right? My memory works, my brain is fluid. I don't want to move too quick. I'm just right with piracetam. And so those are the major differences between the racetams. I hope I've explained them well and, given you some food for thought about approaching different cognitive tasks with different racetams. Because I think again, I have in this home, Smarter, Better, Faster, our Nootropics digital book that teaches you everything. You got to get that guide if you haven't gotten it and read it about nootropics. We hammer this so much. Use nootropics specifically. Use them for specific purposes. As far as I'm concerned, after your short little initial mode of experimentation, the best way to use nootropics is to use them very, very surgically. Because why you're using them. You know which situations you are using them for, right? You know which racetams in this case to apply to which things, and that's just the way that I think you end up using nootropics responsibly, sustainably, and surgically over time. Okay, everybody, that has been the podcast, episode number 67 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Bell. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for being with us. Check us out on the web at livecortex.com. Look, right now, all right, it's Sunday, February 8th. All of our products are $8 off. That includes the Cortex Nootropic Stack. Look, we found, this is basically the craziest thing ever. We found that we could create an extremely intense nootropic experience that's very strong by combining artichoke extract with uridine and CDP choline. Not alpha GPC, not centrophenoxine. It's got to be CDP choline, right? And very particular ingredient quantities, pretty low doses. But the synergy is so strong that it makes Cortex, our stack, such a powerful stack. We put it in a commercial stack. It's called Cortex. Right now, Cortex is $8 off. It's $24 for a bottle of Cortex if you use the coupon code 8, just the number 8, at livecortex.com. Our most popular product is the Nootropic Starter Pack. Look, if you're new to nootropics, then just get this. It's a bottle of our stack Cortex, and it's Smarter, Better, Faster. That's our nootropics book that teaches you everything. Gives you my stacks, teaches you about some racetams, teaches you about New Pep, teaches you about Phenibut, teaches you about PRL 853, gives you Alcar racetam stacks, gives you modafinil caffeine theanine stacks, gives you microdosing aniracetam stacks. I mean, the thing is just packed with a bunch of nootropics information. That's the Nootropic Starter Pack. And then we have individual specific things like, look, I mean, if you're into just learning about all the 8 racetams we just talked about and how to stack them, and then getting a list of like extremely effective proven stacks with all those racetams and a bunch of other good compounds, get the Racetam God Guide. The Racetam God Guide. That's one of our books that's digital and downloadable that is just insanely packed with the information you just can't find perusing Reddit. The web, the nootropics web, I like to say, is like this disparate, spread out, cluster F, basically, of nootropics information that is highly inaccurate in a lot of cases and is non-applicable to most folks. We changed that with our digital guides and actually wrote what people have been looking for, right? Stacks and then answers to questions that people have that they just can't get anywhere else because no one's taken the time to really answer these questions in depth and write out stacks that really work really well for most folks and apply a nootropics methodology and taking some of these nootropics. So get all those digital guides at livecortex.com, our stack Cortex at livecortex.com. All this week, coupon code 8 gets you $8 off of all of our powerful nootropic products. Make it happen, livecortex.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Rock on. Talk to you next time.